Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Diet Diaries. I think this is episode 263, I'm pretty sure. And I've kind of been promising this one for a while. I'm going to dive right into it. We are going to talk about trigger foods. And this episode is really prompted by a lot of messages I've been getting from women in DMs. I've been doing this thing where I'm kind of offering like some free coaching where you can message me and I'll sort of give like some prompts for that. And a lot of the questions I've been getting from people are around trigger foods. The once I start, I can't stop kind of foods. And this is something that I talk about not with every single one of my clients, but I would say about 85% of them struggle with this. And so we are actively working on skills within one-to-one coaching to help them work through this. And I'm going to share a couple of cool stories and outcomes from clients over the years who have made incredible progress with this. Because I think this is one of those things where this feels like a life sentence. Like I am never going to be able to have peanut M&Ms in the house, ever. Anytime they are around, I'm going to eat the entire container and then I'm going to feel like shit. And then I'm going to have to like start everything, whatever I was doing all over again. And I promise you that you are capable of having peanut M&Ms or whatever your trigger food or foods are around. And this is kind of what I wanted to start off with a little bit, was like the story that we have around this, because it's based on our lived experience, right? So right off the bat, the whole thing gets set up by being told that certain foods are bad, right? Nobody is triggered by chicken breast or roasted broccoli or salad or like rice, right? Nobody's triggered by that. We're triggered by sweets, by chips, sometimes by pasta, by like maybe certain like really savory, snacky foods. And the reason that we are triggered by those things is because we are told they are bad from the very beginning, from when we are old enough to understand what food is and understand the difference between good and bad. We're told those foods are bad, that they're fattening, that they're bad for you. They're called junk food. You're only allowed to have them on certain occasions. Those are foods you're given as a reward for eating other foods, right? There's so many mechanisms and so many cultural standards in place that create this belief around these foods. Then on top of that, you have the actual nature of the food itself, right? You've probably heard me talk about, and lots of people talk about this word hyper-palatable, right? Hyper just meaning like a lot of, excessively slow or overactive, excessively so overactive, and palatable meaning like tasteful. And not tasteful in like a classy kind of way, tasteful like it tastes really good, right? So if you think about peanut M&Ms or salt and vinegar potato chips or like a Ben & Jerry's like chunky ice cream or a cake that has like layers of cake and frosting, right? Where there's a combination of flavors and textures, sometimes temperatures, and it lights up your brain in a very powerful way, in a way that our brains were not really meant to be lit up by food, right? There is an evolutionary mismatch between where we have evolved as humans and where our food supply has evolved over the last 100 years. And our brains have really not caught up to be able to deal with some of those foods in the most effective way. So it's really a combination of, I would say, nature versus nurture stuff happening. And that's really interesting. I think it's super helpful to understand that because we place a lot of blame on ourselves, right? I'm not motivated. I have no willpower. I'm not self-disciplined. I didn't try hard enough. I'm lazy. And it's not really any of that at all. It's a combination of some physiological, scientific factors around how this food is made up. It's a combination of cultural, societal factors. And then the biggest piece that we actually have control over, because those other two things we don't have control over, is the absence of a skill set to be around these foods in a way that works. It's not something that very, very few of us are ever taught. And I'll tell you that the women who I work with who don't have issues with trigger foods are the women who were given skills growing up, whose families talked about and used these foods in a much more normalized, regulated way than most people. So it makes total sense. I'm like, oh yeah, well, this is kind of on point. So this is kind of the cycle we get trapped in, right? I'm going to use, let's go with peanut M&Ms. Let's go peanut M&Ms, right? Because when I think peanut M&Ms, I think of like the big, like the Costco jar, the plastic jar with like the big round lid, right? That people might have in an office or some people will keep at home. And I had a client, I have to take a drink. We did a lot of work around peanut M&Ms, and the outcome of her story is really interesting. And I'll kind of weave it in as I go through the episode. But you believe peanut M&Ms are junk food. they're bad for you. And anytime you eat them, you are out of control. So you do not buy them. You don't keep them in the house and you don't buy them. But then your kid brings home a pack from a school party, or I don't know, your husband knows it's your favorite candy and he's trying to do something sweet for you and he brings home a bag and you want to be like, fuck you. But instead you're like, oh, thanks, that's so nice. Or maybe you just tell him, I wish you hadn't done this. It enters your orbit of existence for some reason in some way. And you have them and you're like, oh my God, these are fucking good. And you eat the whole pack. And then you're like, I feel like shit. See, anytime I eat them in 5 seconds and then you go to the next thing. Well, I've already kind of screwed it up for the day. Let me go have this. Let me go have that. Let me go grab this thing from the cabinet. Fuck it. Let's get like a giant pepperoni pizza and 4 pints of ice cream, right? And maybe I'm being a little dramatic, but also maybe not so much. And what happens is you tell yourself you can't have it around. You don't have it around. You don't have it around. You're like, I'm not eating it. I'm good. I fixed the problem. But then as soon as that food enters your orbit and you eat it, you feel out of control and you overeat the thing and you feel like shit. So then you tell yourself, look, see, I was right. When that food is around, I can't control myself and I go off the rails, right? Once I start, I can't stop. I have no self-control. I cannot have that food around. So you swear it off again, you cut it out and you're like, I'm good. I fixed the problem until it shows up in your life again, inevitably. Round and round and round you go. And I know you know exactly what I am talking about because that is the cycle. But here's the thing. If you never have that food around, you will never learn how to be around it. That's like the great irony of the whole thing. In order to be able to not go into fuck it mode and to not feel out of control and to not go off the rails with that food around and feel like shit, you have to learn how to have that food around. You have to expose yourself to it. Scientific fact. And I say scientific fact in terms of behavior change from like a psychological standpoint, but also in terms of the way that our human bodies adapt to new stimulus and new inputs. And I've talked about this in other episodes. So I'll share one kind of anecdotal example here that I think is relevant. Is like with strength training, right? If you were to go in the gym and try to deadlift 150 pounds, you'd get hurt. If you would never strength train before, you would get hurt. And then you'd be like, see, this is why deadlifting is terrible for your back. You just go in the gym and you get hurt. I'm never going to deadlift again. And then so you don't deadlift again. And then you go to pick up a heavy suitcase 6 months later and you hurt your back again. And you're like, oh, see, can't lift anything heavy. Anytime I lift anything heavy, I get hurt. No, it's not. You don't get hurt anytime you lift something heavy. You're getting hurt when you lift something heavy because you never expose yourself to heavy things. And that's why strength training exists in this paradigm called progressive overload, where you start light and you slowly add on a little bit more weight and a little bit more weight and a little bit more weight, and your body adapts. This is the same thing. You have to learn how to adapt to having these foods around, and you have to do that in a very, very structured way. And that is what I'm going to walk you through today. So this is going to be one of the most useful, actionable episodes that maybe I have ever done, or certainly done recently, I think. And you are going to want to save this one and share it with all your friends. Guaranteed. Because this is really going to transform the way that you think about these foods. Hopefully, I've already started to do that a little bit, just to give you a little bit of a reframe as to why you feel the way you feel around these foods, right? Kind of going back to the first couple minutes of the podcast. So, a big part of this that is kind of like the umbrella that goes over the structure I'm going to walk through is giving yourself permission, right? So, what often happens with these types of foods is we rule them out. They are out. They are not allowed. They are off the table. I'm not allowed to eat those foods until it ends up in your orbit, in your personal space, for some reason out of your control. Or let's say you're out to dinner and someone orders a plate of fries, or they order a big dessert and you're like, oh my God, I really want some. Or everyone's having some, I'm going to have some. Or your quote unquote willpower is feeling low. You're like, I'll just have one bite. And then one bite turns into 6 bites to 10 bites. Let's order 3 more desserts. Or I'm going to go home and I'm going to buy a Snickers bar on the way home. And I'm going to go eat all my kids' candy when I get home because I've already blown the day. This is separate but related. If you only allow yourself to have these foods in certain situations, meaning when you've already blown it and you say, fuck it, or it's like a designated cheat day, you never give yourself the chance to know if you want more and when you really want them. And so part of this work, I'm not going to go super into this. I might in another episode, and I've done a couple episodes about it in the past. I will try to find them and link them if I can. I'm not the best with that. Is giving yourself unconditional permission to have those foods. Now, I want to say that some of you might be familiar with the intuitive eating process, and unconditional permission is a huge part of that. But the way that I coach it is different than in intuitive eating, because in intuitive eating, it kind of comes along and most people experience is like, oh, it's like a free for all. Oh, cupcakes are my trigger food. Great. I'm allowed to have cupcakes whenever I want. Great. I'm just going to eat cupcakes all the time. And people go through that and they gain weight. And sometimes for some people, that is a helpful part of the process, but it's not a helpful process for everyone. And for some people, that can be very, very triggering in a different way. And so the way that I coach permission is with a lot of structure. And that is what I'm going to walk you through. So it's the permission to have this thing when you want it, not just when a circumstance tells you, or it's a cheat day, or you've already blown it. So it's like, fuck it, I might as well go all in. Because really going back to like the exposure thing, this is really about graded exposure. And you need to practice, and I use that word very deliberately, you need to practice having these foods around in a very, very structured way. That is how you're going to develop the skill set to be able to have them around in any situation and be able to make a thoughtful choice and either eat it or not eat it, eat as much as you want or as little as you want, and feel great about it no matter what your choice is. So we're going to start to walk through this. I have a lot of notes and I want to make sure that I'm not like skipping anything. So I'm going to take a quick drink. Okay, let's dive in. So, and as you're listening to this, I want you to think about this. I want you to kind of like do this with me in your head. And this is the process. This is a process I work with all my clients. The client I mentioned earlier around peanut M&Ms were her thing. And so the way we started, right, her family used to keep those big Costco-sized jars of peanut M&Ms in their house. And from day one of us working together, it was something that we talked about. She really struggled, where she would be eating like handfuls and handfuls and handfuls out of it, and it became extremely stressful. But she had young kids, and it was like, what do I do? Do I not keep them around? Do I get rid of it? And so the process that we worked on, and this is what you're going to do, is I want you to think in your mind now about a trigger food that feels hard for you. That when it's that once I start, I can't stop feeling. I think that's such a great way to capture what I'm talking about. Once I start, I can't stop. For some people, I just had a conversation with a new client around, for her, it's tortilla chips and gummy candies. I have other clients where it's peanut M&Ms, Hershey Kisses, French fries, ice cream. I mean, there's so many, it could be really anything. But again, I just urge you to notice that like, it's not something that, it's not salad. It's not like baby carrots. It could be baby carrots dipped in hummus. It could be vegetables in dip, because the dip adds a whole other element, right? But it's not going to be like, cut up cucumbers and celery. It's not going to be, grilled chicken. It's not going to be, a salad with like oil and vinegar, right? It is going to be these crunchy, salty, sweet, hyper-palatable foods that are combining flavors and textures in a way that's very, very powerful. So I want you to bring one into your mind right now. Because the first thing you're going to do is you are going to identify how to get a single serve portion of that thing, right? So for peanut M&Ms, you're going to go to the drugstore and you're going to buy a pack of peanut M&Ms. You're going to get a slice of cake. You're going to get one cookie from a bakery. You're going to get a snack-sized bag of chips, right? You're going to get a mini ice cream. They have all those like mini Haagen-Dazs ice creams, right? Not a whole pint, not a whole big thing. You're going to get one thing. And you're going to bring it home and you're going to put it in your cabinet, okay? And then the next time you want this thing, you have an urge for it, you are going to have it, but with the following structure. Number one, it is going to be after a meal. You are not going to eat that thing when you are hungry, because that is going to be problematic. When we try to use these foods in jobs that they are not meant for, things go downhill really fast. And that is not a willpower thing. That's not even a food thing. That is a mismatch between what we are asking that food to do and what it is actually capable of doing. I make this analogy all the time. It's like asking a history teacher to teach a science class. Can't be done. Cannot be done, and it screws everyone up on both sides, right? If you ask a bag of chips to fill up hunger, never going to happen. You're going to have to eat 10 bags of chips to fill up hunger, and then you're going to feel like shit, and it's not going to be good. So Whenever you want this food, it needs to be after a meal, and after a meal that you feel full from, that has had protein, that's had a veggie, that's had a carb, that feels well-rounded in some way. That is number one. You are not going to have this food when you are hungry, when you are looking for some type of like an afternoon snack. This is very important. So after a meal, breakfast, lunch, dinner, I don't care, but it's going to be after a meal. That's number one. Number two, you are going to put this thing on a plate or a napkin or a bowl, whatever type of receptacle or utensil is relevant, you're going to do that. And if you have a bag of peanut M&Ms, you're going to dump them out like into a bowl. You're going to put a piece of cake on a plate. You're going to scoop some ice cream into a little bowl, and you're going to have your utensil. Okay? That's number two. Number three, you are going to sit down at a table. You are not going to stand in your kitchen. You are not going to be on your couch. You're not going to be in your car. You're going to sit down at a table. That's number three. Number four, you are going to have no distractions, no phone, no work, no podcast, no email, no nothing. Now, I understand you may not be able to socially isolate yourself, that you might have people around in your house. I get it, but there are no other distractions, right? Those are distractions you can't really control. If you are able to do this when things are quiet or your kids are at activities or sleeping or whatever, if kids are a thing for you, great. That's not always possible. I would not advise doing this if you've got like a 2-year-old running around banging on your leg. Like that's going to be really tough. So I would, if you are someone who has young kids at home and you're just practicing this, you are going to want to practice at least your first few times when that is not the situation. Or can your partner take the kid for 15 minutes? Because attention is paramount for this. So no phones, no emails. It's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to be you and the food. And that is exactly what we want. Okay, so that's your structure. And if any one of those things is not being met, you're not going to practice at that time. That may sound strict, but this does require a lot of structure. And when we talk about discipline, the discipline is putting the structure in place, right? The discipline isn't around avoiding the food or how you eat the food. It's about putting the structure in place, putting those boundaries in place, because this is what you need in order to be successful. Okay, so then you're going to take a bite of your food and you are going to pay a shit ton of attention, which is going to be pretty easy to do because you're not scrolling TikTok, you're not checking work email, you're not listening to a podcast, you're not chasing your kid around the kitchen. It's just you and the food. Separately, you will be stunned when you start to think about the last time it was just you and food. I bet that most of you will not be able to recall the last time that happened, that's the society we live in, which is also why this becomes so difficult. Because we have very little capacity to pay attention to what we're eating. Food is an afterthought. It's secondary to everything else. And that's a problem that we're working on with this. So you're going to take your bite and you're going to pay attention. What does it taste like? What is the texture? How much am I enjoying this? Does it taste as good as I always think it tastes? Does it taste as good as I anticipated it tasting? Does it taste as good as I hoped it would taste? Maybe yes, maybe not. And then you're going to take another bite and you're going to pay attention to the same thing. How does it taste? What is the texture? What am I noticing? How am I feeling? And you are going to pay attention, especially to the enjoyment piece, because I didn't explicitly mention this earlier. I started to, and I think I meant to come back. These foods that we are talking about here have one job and one job only. They are to taste good, like 99% of the time. Maybe pasta is like maybe an exception, but even pasta needs to be ideally paired with some type of protein and veggies in order for it to like feel filling. The job of these foods is to taste good. And so you want to be paying very close attention to that level of enjoyment and when it starts to change, because almost always it does. There is a law of diminishing returns with these foods, where after a certain number of bites, you will start to notice that it doesn't taste the same as it did the first couple. And that is a very important tipping point, very important. And you are completely unable to notice that when you're eating these foods in a typical scenario, one, because you never learned how to pay attention to it before, and two, because there's just no capacity to pay attention because your attention is going to 10,000 other things, and attention is a very finite resource. And when you start to notice that it's not as good, that it doesn't taste as good as the first 1, 2, or 3 bites, and maybe you might even notice that your third bite doesn't taste as good, you're going to pause and you are going to put it down and you are going to set a timer. And so I'm going to circle back to my client who did this with the peanut M&Ms, because her biggest aha around this when she did this work was that she actually didn't even like peanut M&Ms in the way that she thought she did. And it was like mind-blowing to her. And then they just became a non-issue after that. She's like, I don't even really like these. There's other things that I like more. And so this food that she had this all or nothing relationship with all this time, she suddenly had this new awareness and knowledge around it that she'd never had before, because she didn't have the skills to know it. There were assumptions made. There was conditioning and behavior from all these years and all these beliefs that she had that turned out to not match up with her, like what her true lived experience was with this food. And it was like fucking life altering in a really, really cool and huge way. And a little bit of a sidebar with this, if you are someone who wants to lose weight, this work plays a huge role in that. Huge. Because if you are someone who is constantly kind of going on and off the wagon with foods and going in and out of all or nothing cycles and some version of a binge restrict, whether or not you're thinking of it as a true binge or not, or it's just overeating, or the once I start, I can't stop. When you start to build a skill set around these foods and you are able to self-regulate around them, your intake of them will regulate and moderate over time. And that will impact your overall food/caloric intake, and that will play a really big role in fat loss. And I've seen this happen with numerous clients. So that's one reason why this skill is really valuable if you are someone who wants to or needs to lose weight. Tantamount to that, meaning equally as important, and for some people even more important, is the calm, the peace, the ease, the turning down of the food noise around this, right? I haven't even talked about food noise, but I will tell you that the all or nothing, restrict, I can't have it around, is actually only turning the food noise up. You might feel like the food noise is quiet because that food isn't around, but not having something around is not coping with a problem. It's avoiding it. Like, let's just be honest about that. And we do that in lots of ways, right? Avoidance is not a solution for a problem. It's just avoiding it, because inevitably that situation, that problem, that stimulus is going to come back to you and you won't be able to avoid it. And then you're fucked, right? So as soon as that food comes back into your presence, the food noise is through the fucking roof. So you actually haven't changed your food noise. You've just avoided it. These skills will 100%, no question, I would pretty much guarantee you this, turn down your food noise on these foods over time. So where we left off, I'm going to come back. I know exactly where I left off was you have taken your bites, you're paying attention. You've gotten to the point where you start to notice that the food no longer tastes as good. And if you're not sure, if you're like, I don't know if it's tasting as good, I don't know. Or you know what, I only have 2 bites left and it still tastes as good. That's okay, because sometimes that can happen. Either way, you are going to pause and you are going to set a timer for 5 minutes. And you're going to get up, and you're going to walk away from the food. You're going to leave it there and you're going to go do something else. Whatever you want to do. You want to go scroll your phone for 5 minutes or go deal with your kid or answer a work email, fine. But set the timer on your phone so it goes off, and then see where you are at. Are you still interested in the food? Do you still want more? Were you even thinking about it those whole 5 minutes? Notice, pay attention. There is a shit ton of information in what you will notice. If you really want more, have another bite and go through that process again. You sit back down at the table, the phone goes away, and you have another bite. And you check in and you notice and you repeat that process. You may be like, yeah, I don't want any more. Great. You can, if there's anything left, I probably would recommend throwing it away, or if you want to give it to a family member, because this isn't about, not having the food around. This is around graded exposure. And so this is very strategic. You're not going to go out and buy a single serve of all your trigger foods. You're going to do it one at a time. And so you're going to build up your capacity. And so yes, there is a part of this where not having a lot of trigger foods around is going to be helpful, but having none around forever, no. You're going to try to minimize the amount around as you go through this process, and then you will slowly add on. And you could practice this the next day. And I know that might seem really confrontational because you're like, oh my God, I can't have peanut M&Ms 2 days in a row. I'm going to go off the rails. Well, look at how many peanut M&Ms you actually ate. Look at your experience and look at, did you go off the rails? Or were you able to do this? And I will pretty much promise that you are probably able to do that because of all the structure you put in place. It's going to feel uncomfortable. It's going to feel hard. You're going to be like, this is annoying. Yep, it's a lot of work. I'm not going to lie to you. It is a lot of work. And also, it is transformative. And the cool thing about this is as soon as you do this a few times and you get even the smallest amount of evidence that you can do this, things start to shift. Because suddenly you're like, oh, wait a minute. Maybe I'm not totally out of control. Maybe I'm not totally lacking willpower. I can actually do this. And things start to shift. A really big part of behavior change is creating new evidence of what you're capable of. When you've never done a thing before, it feels really hard. You're like, I can't do this. I've never done this. I don't know how to do this. You have no belief that you can do it. So it's setting yourself up in a way with a lot of structure and a lot of support so that you can do the things, so you can get that evidence, right? This is all very strategic and very thoughtful and very intentional. This is not like, oh, I just pulled these random skills together. No, this is done completely based on the way that behavior change works. And that is why it works. But this is doing something very small and very doable. It's going to feel uncomfortable, but it's a tolerable amount of discomfort, which is right. It's a Goldilocks thing, so that you can get the evidence that you are able to have this food in your presence and not say, fuck it, and not go off the rails. And as soon as you do that, even one time, things will start to shift, and then you're going to slowly build from there. So that's really what I wanted to walk you through today. I'm going to scroll through my notes like I always do. And I'll go back to, right, I talked about avoidance before, right? Saying I can't have that in the house is not a weight loss strategy. It's not a behavior change strategy. It's not an eating strategy. It's not a control strategy. I guess maybe it's a control strategy. But it is a one-way ticket to staying stuck exactly where you are. And I know it feels so tempting to do that. It feels easy. It feels easier to do that probably than to do what I just walked you through. And I get that. I fully acknowledge that. But this work is hard. Like, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't sugarcoat that. If you want to change the way that you feel around these foods and stop having crazy food noise and stop struggling with not being able to lose weight or continuing to gain weight or freaking out every time your kid brings something home or freaking out every time you have to go out to dinner and someone orders something that you are stressed out about ordering, this is how you do it. This is like a quality of life game changer. So if you've got questions, let me know. I'm actually considering turning this into like a little bit of like a mini course with a little bit of like structure and like maybe like a little journal and a worksheet to like really build this out for you. Because I know that this is something that like 99% of you struggle with. It's something that I struggled with, and this was literally the process that I used, right? So I shared this story of one of my clients. And also, I remember going through this with cake, right? Cake was always a big thing for me. I mean, standing at the kitchen counter, like eating cake wasn't something I did all the time, but anytime there was cake in the house, it was a huge problem. And the great irony is that today's Thursday, February 12th, Danny ordered us a Barefoot Contessa chocolate cake for the three of us, like a little Valentine's Day treat. It was really sweet, a little mini one. It's sitting in the fridge. I have zero feelings about it. I'm excited to have it, but I have zero stress around what I'm going to do after I have a piece, what I'm going to do when I know that it's sitting in the fridge, how long it's going to be there, how am I going to eat it, what's going to happen. Zero noise, you guys, zero. And cake is like my thing. Cake has been one of my biggest trigger foods over the course of my life. Like I love cake. I love cake. It's like my favorite dessert. Typically some type of cake with like a frosting or an icing mixed in. So it is, I don't take that for granted ever. And so I know how much you guys who are listening are struggling with, and I know what's possible for you. And I hope that this podcast episode walks you through that so you can start to try it on your own experiment and then say, yeah, I want more of this. Like, I want support. I really want to go all in on this and do this. And that's what I'm here for. So thank you guys for listening. Please share this with anyone for whom you think it might be helpful. And I will be back next week.